Hello, friends and adventurers! If you've ever seen or tried combat in Gothic games, you'll have noticed it's janky and clunky. Yep, as you can see. Despite its awkwardness, you can become a pro at combat in Gothic 1 and Gothic 2 games and their respective mods. We'll be covering beginner, intermediate, and expert tips and lessons on how to master Gothic combat and how you can handle everything the game can throw at you. First off, let's talk game settings. I recommend you go into your Gothic settings and change mouse sensitivity to its highest. Personally, I find the controls more responsive that way, because the ability to quickly turn your hero around using your mouse can actually mean the difference between life and death in a battle. I also recommend you disable lock-on for enemies, since it forces you to fight one opponent while others may flank you. In addition, a personal quirk I have is I like to disable weapon trails. It's just a pet peeve of mine, but I enjoy the game without these tracers. To disable them, you simply locate your Gothic .txt file, which should be in your system folder in your Gothic game folder. Check the show weapon trails and simply set it to 0. Now, the basic moves and mechanics we'll start with are the following: iframes, backstepping, strafing, side swings, staggering enemies, and when to block and when not to block. Let's start with iframes. Iframes, or invincibility frames, are a core combat mechanic. They're basically a set of animation frames that prevent you from taking damage from a forward attack. To trigger an iframe, you simply need to backstep once by pressing your move back button. By default is on the arrow key, so allow me to demonstrate. Let's test the default damage a scavenger does to us. As you can see, each hit is going to cost me about 5 hit points because I'm wearing armor. Now, if I start backstepping out of his attack, I take 0 damage. The cool part of this trick is that it works on all opponents. It doesn't matter if an enemy does 5 damage or 5000. Now, let's spawn in a troll and see iframes in action versus 1, and then we're also gonna spawn in a snapper. Backstepping is the first move we will need to master. It's probably the most important move, since it enables you to face powerful enemies even at level 1. Backstepping is one of those moves that are easy to learn but hard to master, but once you do it, you're gonna be pretty golden. Practice makes perfect. The second move we need to learn is strafing. Sometimes backstepping isn't enough, and it's more useful to strafe around an opponent. Take this orc for example. He lunges at me with a downward slash. It's fairly easy to just strafe around him and get a few hits in. Strafing allows us to get around their flank and opens them up for attack. Note enemy attack patterns. Strafing is most useful against enemies that tend to charge forward at you, like a hussar you owe money to. Also here is where we can combine our next lesson, and that is side swings. Side swings have faster animations overall and higher damage output as a result. They work exceptionally well when we add strafing into the mix. The fastest weapons in the game are one-handed weapons. If we combine side swings against this troll, for example, our overall DPS will be higher than the standard attack combos. Now, most enemies in the game, with a few exceptions, have a staggering animation when hit. How long the animation lasts? Well, it depends on the enemy type. Zombies, for example, have probably the longest staggering animations in the game. Let's spawn an unfortunate soul so we can put him to rest and see how staggering works. As you can see, each time we hit the bugger, he takes a step back and we can stagger lock him into oblivion. The best tactic is to face enemies into a wall, and as cheesy as it is, use side swings to bring them down. Here's a golem that I managed to place against a wall and bash him to pieces. Blocking in Gothic games, especially in Gothic 2, is only effective against enemies that have a weapon equipped, such as orcs, undead, or humanoid enemies. Keep in mind that Gothic 1 uses different mechanics from Gothic 2. There are exceptions, of course. You can install certain mods that let you use shields, for example, that can block monster attacks as well. But those are niche cases, and we won't be covering them today. The best blocking combo I have discovered is a double block against enemies. Humanoid opponents tend to have an attack pattern that either has them launch one hit on you or 2 free successive fast hits. Blocking twice helps err on the side of caution. Here's an example how easy it is to deal with a high-level skeleton, even at a low-level weapon skill. Let's move on to intermediate lessons, which are forward attacks and enemy positioning. Forward attacks are pretty much what they sound like. When you initiate a forward attack, your character takes a step towards the enemy, closing the distance to him. Now, one good combination of moves is to combine a forward attack with a backstep, as exemplified in this scenario. As for enemy positioning, you do not need to fight enemies where you see them. If you feel the battleground is unfavorable, just aggro enemies and place them where you want them. You choose the battlefield, not them. Take this pack of wolves, for example. I don't feel too comfy jumping into the middle of a bloodthirsty pack of wolves, so I decide to peel off a few of them from the pack, so the fight is more manageable. I want the ground to favor my moves and make their pathfinding as difficult as possible. Now, as for expert moves, they cover animation cancelling, using water to your advantage, taking advantage of feeding behavior, and if you are a dirty product enjoyer, aka cheese, getting enemies stuck. Now, as for expert move and animation cancelling, first you need to understand how the attack animations work in combos. So please let me exemplify. These are the attacks for beginner one-handed weapons, novice one-handed weapons, and master one-handed weapons. The two-handed weapons are these, and these, and the master ones. Now, as fancy and flashy as they are very practical to use. And in comes animation cancelling. You can cancel your attack in a variety of ways, but my preferred version is attacking while strafing. So when you do simply a forward attack, you hold down your strafe button, which my default is on A or D. I hold my attack button, the strafe button, and I simply press a forward attack on W. If I time it right, I can actually machine gun my two-handed weapon to do very fast attacks. This is exceptionally useful if you manage to place an enemy against the wall, or if they are staggered. You can actually increase your DPS in a significant fashion this way. Another cheesy way to deal with enemies is simply getting them stuck. One thing I like to do from time to time is simply get a powerful group of enemies in the water and teach them that a level 1 cheesy Gothic veteran is just as powerful as a level 40 player. See this warg? He can easily one-shot me at level 1. But if I force him to swim after me and come back to shore... Sorry wargy, no dinner for you tonight. Sometimes you will fight a group of carnivore enemies, and instead of having an enemy charge you, he rushes to a nearby body to feed off of it. Carnivores in Gothic have feeding behaviors that are triggered when there is prey to munch on nearby. This changes their aggro distance to you, forcing the enemy to concentrate on its feeding and ignoring you. Here's an example of me archering down a few snappers and see what happens to their buddies. Note, this only works with carnivores, so don't expect herbivores to start munching on their pack. If you feel your situation is hopeless and the game insists on throwing 20 orcs at you, then by all means, get them stuck. There is no shame. The internet is a forgiving place and nobody will mention anything. Seriously, use all the tools you can muster. Why did I include this tip on the expert lessons? Because becoming a master of cheese means moving enemies to your tune. Why not? Just do it. It's fun. It's a game. It's supposed to be fun. Even if that means making fun of the AI and their pathfinding. As for magic is a hot topic due to the use of potion keys. By default, mages are extremely weak in the beginning due to their low mana pool. To this end, the devs added quick potion keys in the game. The keys are normally disabled, but you can enable them in your Gothic ini file. If you press them in combat, you will use a healing or mana potion instantly, while skipping the animation to drink them. On an English version of Gothic, the H key is for healing and the P key is for mana. This system is a contentious subject for the Gothic community. Some feel it's cheating, some argue it's the only way to play a mage. Now, whatever your opinion may be, the devs put the system in place if you want to make use of it. A magic guide will probably be its own video, since there are different spells to cover and how to be an effective mage. And as for range combat, archery is fairly straightforward in Gothic. Look around for potential vantage points such as rocks, trees, walls, crates, or anything you can climb on. The game is flush with verticality and places you can use to get a height advantage on enemies. If no vantage points are viable, popping a speed potion and leading an enemy to an area such as a cliff you can climb on fast is also a good tactic. Now, archery is one of those combat options that polarizes Gothic players. On one hand, it's very cheesy in a sense that it's basically you climbing a tree where enemies can't reach you and sniping them at your leisure. On the other hand, it's also fun to find special spots where you can handle high-level monsters with nothing but an instrument flinging sharp sticks at enemies. Especially in Gothic 1, where archery is so freaking overpowered that in Chapter 1, if you get a longbow, you can clear the entire map at your leisure. Now you decide whether archery is fun or not. If you play with mods like the Liver or New Balance mods, they come with a free aim mod, which you can also install in your Gothic base game by default. The free aim mod does what it sounds like. It gives you free aim like Oblivion, Skyrim or Gothic 3, but it's a bit janky. The mod works by working off your bow skill or your crossbow skill depending on what you're using. If you have low skill, the game will calculate a higher variance and you'll miss a lot. And I do mean a lot at the lower skill. When I played Liver, I missed 5 out of 7 shots at point blank range using a bow and having 30 bow skill. Now, this mod works best when you are above, let's say, 60% in bow or crossbow, but be prepared for some pain and frustration if you want to be an archer with free aim. New Balance, by contrast, has better archery support and you'll hit most of your shots even at the lower level skill. As for armor, the formula for damage in Gothic usually works like this. Note, some Gothic mods can tweak the armor formula so it works different. Liver or New Balance has entirely different armor and damage formulas, but the basic formula is this. A normal hit is composed of weapon damage plus your strength minus the armor value of the enemy -1, and everything is divided by 10. Now, assuming that the total damage you do is more than 5. If it's less than 5, you will do a minimum damage of 5 damage hit points. So for example, if I do, let's say, 10 damage to a scavenger and the scavenger has 7 armor, I don't actually do 3 damage to it, I'm gonna do a minimum damage of 5. Now, critical hits are interesting since they are composed of weapon damage plus strength minus the armor value of the enemy, and that's the total damage. It's no longer divided by 5. Critical hits are actually amazingly powerful. In other words, unless you do a critical hit, you'll do 1/10 of the damage on normal hits. This is why putting points into a specific weapon skill is actually more impactful than using powerful weapons. A quick example would be this. Let's assume I make a build where I rush to have 100% in one-handed weapons, but only 30 strength. 100% means I'll always do critical hits with one-handed weapons. Let's say I have a sword that does 50 damage. My critical hits will always be 80 points of damage minus the armor of the opponent. Let's say, for the sake of example, my enemy will have 30 points of armor. That means I will consistently be doing 50 points of damage with every hit. By comparison, let's say I go for a balanced approach between investing into strength and one-handed skill. I have a sword that does 50 damage. I have 40% in one-handed weapons, and my strength is 100. A normal hit will do 150 points of damage minus the enemy armor, which let's say it's 30, and then we subtract 1 more point, and all of that will be divided by 10. Meaning I will be doing 11 points of damage on regular hits despite me having almost 3 times as much strength in example number 1. Why 11 points of damage? Because the final total damage is gonna come out to 11.9, but the game rounds it down. So it's not 12, it's 11. Despite me having almost 3 times as much strength than example number 1. 40% of the time, I will be doing 120 points of damage minus the armor, and 60% of the time, I will be doing 11 points of damage. Can you notice the huge difference? It's actually amazingly big. I don't know if it's a very good system or not, maybe it's not the best system, but this is how Gothic damage works. While it sounds as a pretty balanced spread, more often you'll notice how you chip away little bits of the enemy's HP, while suddenly you do 2 hits and they are dead. In example number 1, I can reliably guess how many hits I need to take down an enemy. In example number 2, RNG can work against you, and despite being way more buff, way stronger, you can end up doing a lot of tickles to an enemy. This leads me to suggest that you should focus on developing weapon skills before stats. Keep in mind, as you play the game, you can find more powerful weapons that require fewer stat points to use, especially if you go the route of the blacksmith. Weapons you forge yourself have lower stat requirements, more damage, and bonuses than the regular counterparts with the same stat requirements. This is true for Gothic 2, Gothic 2 mods, Archolos, and generally everything Gothic related, except Gothic 1 where you really don't have any forging. You can only forge one type of sword and it's not that amazing. Now as for ranged weapons, the formula is simple. Ranged weapons are composed of weapon damage plus dexterity minus the armor value of the enemy. All of that equals your total damage. There are no crits in Gothic 2 for ranged weapons. Maybe some mods have them, but the base game of Gothic 2 Gold or Knight of the Raven doesn't have it. The bow or crossbow skill really just affects your chance to hit an opponent. Keep in mind, this is different in Gothic 1, where ranged weapons actually behave just like melee weapons in Gothic 2. But for Gothic 2 purposes and mods built on the same formulas, you can treat ranged weapons as such. Also important to note, there are melee weapons that use the dexterity stats, but for damage purposes they actually factor in strength. So while that Master Sword you find in Gothic 2 really looks attractive, keep in mind it uses strength for damage, not dexterity. Why the difference? Probably the developers didn't have time to iron out some mechanics. In the end, how you build your character is up to you and how it makes you happy. Gothic is a pretty versatile game that has mods to tailor to any build you like. Other general tips I have is don't hoard spells for a rainy day, don't hoard potions or healing items, and by default Gothic 1 and 2 throws a lot of resources your way, so don't hold back. Let me know in the comments if you have found out any tips, any tricks, any combat strategies I haven't covered in this guide. I know there's a few things I've left out, mostly because I think they are pretty minor, such as the fact that certain enemy types have a vulnerability to certain damage types. For example, fire golems have vulnerability to ice damage, but I think that's a pretty intuitive mechanic in itself, and I didn't really feel the need to cover that. But please let me know, what tactics do you use? What secrets have you uncovered in the game? Please let me know down below in the comment section. I'm actually always curious to learn and share information with everybody. Now once all is said and done, it all comes down to practice and studying enemy behavior. All enemies have patterns you can learn and use against them to your heart's content. Put all of these exercises into the game and suddenly Gothic 2 combat won't seem as clunky, but rather you'll feel a natural combat rhythm akin to dancing. Thank you guys for watching, hope you have a lovely day, and hope you learn something that will help Gothic combat be a little less stressful for you. Thank you, and as always, remember, the most important story in the world is our own. Cheers guys and gals, until next we meet.